Okay, and we're already, the number of participants are raising. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining the platform today. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. Just to use this opportunity while we are waiting all other attendees, I just wanna to let you know that this is a series of the webinars which we'll be conducting once per month. So just receive information from your respective chapters, register to the future webinars as well, and yeah, we'll be happy to see you at the webinars. Okay, it's a time to start our webinar. And again, I would like to thank everyone who joined us today. It's my pleasure to share with us that this webinar series is an initiative of 7 EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa chapters. And I would like to thank your chapter leaders who initiated these webinars, who invited you all, who stood in the communication with all of you to ensure that you are able to join this webinar. I'm Alla Kazaeva, Europe, Middle East, and Africa Regional Development Manager. And I'm so happy to introduce our speaker today. This is my colleague from International Coaching Federation Global, Christine Kelly. And Christine is ICF Assistant Director of Ethics, Policy, and Compliance. Before I provide the mic to Christine, I just wanted to share some housekeeping with you. So you all have an opportunity, and thank you so much. I see that we already have some greetings or questions in the chat. Please use chat option to share your questions to Christine. We'll try to do our best to answer to all the questions by the end of the webinar. Webinar is set for 60 minutes. If we will not be able to answer to all the questions, they will definitely will be answered in written and distributed from your chapter leaders. So, Christine, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to talk about ethics in ICF today. And the mic is yours.
Thank you, Alla, and hello to all of you who have joined. Very nice to be here with you all today. My complete honor and my pleasure, because I enjoy speaking about this, and it's what I live and breathe with ICF. So we'll dive right in. I have a lot of content that I'm going to attempt to cover, and we'd love to answer as many questions as we're able to live. And then, as Alla said, we will follow up after the fact if there are additional questions if we run out of time. But thank you again for being here. So I want to just dive right into ethics, and ethics are very much a part of the foundation of ICF, as I'm sure all of you are well aware of. ICF has really taken the lead in developing a definition of coaching, a philosophy of coaching, and really establishing ethical standards amongst all of its stakeholders. So we take a lot of pride in ethics and all of the different initiatives that we have from the Independent Review Board and our ethical conduct review process, our credentialing system, our program accreditation process, really everything. It all pieces together to form this great foundation of ethics, and that ICF is really proud of. So let's dive right in. We'll start with the Code of Ethics. And really, the challenge of working ethically, so as a coach, means that members, you will inevitably encounter situations that require responses to unexpected issues, resolution of dilemmas, and solutions to problems. And so that's where the Code of Ethics comes in. It's intended to assist people who are subject to the code, so all of our ICF members and our credential holders, by directing you to the variety of ethical factors that may need to be taken into consideration to identify ways of approaching ethical behavior. So the new version of the code, and I'll get into that here in a little bit, talks a lot about ICF professionals. And people who, an ICF professional is someone who accepts the code. So when you become a member of the ICF, or you join, you join the ICF, or you earn an ICF credential, you are automatically bound by the code of ethics in your work. And so it's a really important foundation for you as a coach as well. So just a high level overview of what the code review, this is the code review team, but just to the process in creating the ICF code of ethics. I want to just walk through some of that. Every 3 years, the ICF code of ethics is reviewed, and we have a code review team that's in place each time the code undergoes this review. And the most recent code that went into effect of January of this year, 2020, the team that had worked behind the scenes on that, they put a lot of time. They started their work in 2018, actually. So put a lot of manpower into revising the code of ethics, lots of conversation, lots of research, lots of work that went into that process. So the code was approved in late 2019 by the global, at the time, there was just one board of directors for ICF, and it was the global board who approved it. And really the code review team at that time, they continued to work. There was a creation of our ethical interpretive statements, which is something new with this version of the code. Super helpful resource. And it's really, and I'll go into it a little bit more later on, but it's a really good resource for people to better understand the code and how to apply the standards to their everyday coaching. So really great resource. And in addition, we still have people from our code review team, as well as the ethics community at large, for ICF that are working on updating the ethics course that's available on our website, coachfederation.org. Currently, the version of the course that's on the website is from our 2015 version of the Code of Ethics, or the previous version of the code. We kept it up so people could still use it, because you can get 3 CCEs in ethics by completing it. But we do actively have a group of people who are working on rebuilding this and making it reflective of the current version of the code. So the work of the code review team goes, much further than just revising the code, which is a huge job in and of itself, but there's lots of additional pieces that are involved as well. So the Code of Ethics, the newly revised code has 5 parts. There's the introduction, key definitions, the core values and ethical principles, the ethical standards themselves, and then the pledge. So it's just, it really, and as I said before, it applies to anyone who is bound by the Code of Ethics. So we're calling them ICF professionals in this version of the code. And beyond, being a member or a credential holder, but an ICF professional can also pertain to, anytime that you're referring to yourself as an ICF professional. It could be as a supervisor, a coach supervisor, a mentor coach, a coach trainer, a student of coaching. It broadens that a bit, just so that way you're aware that anytime you're presenting yourself as an ICF professional, you should be thinking about the Code of Ethics and how you're showing up in those relationships. Okay. All right, just want to make sure I get all the high points for you all. So as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, the ethical interpretive statements was a new piece that was created for this version of the code. And it's been really helpful. It's actually already been updated once since the code went into effect in January of this year. It is a living document, meaning that it will be looked at and revised on a regular basis. The independent review board will be maintaining that work and making sure that updates are made. If you go to the page on the website, the URL is on the page on the screen that you can see. There is an email address where you can reach out to us. So if you're looking through the interpretive statements and you feel like something could be missing, or perhaps something's not explained very well, like you could put requests in to see additional changes made to these interpretive statements. But as I mentioned, they were really created as a supplemental support for people when they're reviewing the code, so they can better understand the standards and then how they can apply those standards to their everyday coaching practice. And if you go to the page that you can see on the right side of the screen is just a screenshot of what the interpretive statements look like on the website. And they're broken down by standards. So each of the standards of the code has their own space, and you can expand those blue boxes and it will give you additional information around what that code standard means. Okay. There we go. So we'll go into the Independent Review Board. The IRB, they oversee the ethical conduct review process. ICF is very much committed to providing a forum where people can bring complaints about alleged breaches of the Code of Ethics. And by ICF members or ICF credential holders. And so that's what the ethical conduct review process is. And really, ICF adopted a policy and a set of procedures that provide for the review, an investigation, and a response to these alleged unethical breaches that are had. So the Independent Review Board, they've been in existence for a really long time, and we actually just added 10 or so new people to the Independent Review Board. As ICF continues to grow and the different family organizations that now make up this larger ICF system, there was a need to grow that pool a bit. So there's 21 members of the Independent Review Board. They come from all regions of the ICF world. And I believe there's 12 countries represented within that group now, but they do really great work. So I'm sure you've probably met some of the Independent Review Board folks who live in your region, but they work very hard to maintain the standards of the ICF and the ethical conduct review process. So you can see on the screen, these are the kinds of complaints that the IRB will look at through the ethical conduct review process. And really, it's anytime someone has potentially breached the ICF Code of Ethics, we could receive a complaint about it. So, but in addition to the ethical conduct review process, there's also a program complaint process. Now the program complaints, they are not managed by the Independent Review Board. We do have our coach training family organization. They have their own program complaint process, but people are able to bring complaints against ICF accredited coach training programs, as well as concerns about curriculum and those sorts of things. But we do take all complaints very seriously. Programs, they have to follow, much like an individual coach has to follow the Code of Ethics. Training programs that are accredited by ICF have a very stringent code of conduct that they follow. So their process, it really just ensures the integrity of ICF accredited programs. It protects consumers of coach training, and it allows, much like the ECR process, it allows ICF to review, investigate, and respond to alleged breaches of the Code of Conduct. So it's very, very important as well. People are always curious about what kinds of complaints ICF sees, so I wanted to break down some of that for you, and you can see on the screen. We based it on 2019 just because that's the last full year of data that we have. And you can see here that we receive, for the ethical conduct review process, so the process that involves individual coaches, and the Code of Ethics, we received 20 formal complaints. Only 9 of those complaints met the requirements for initial review, meaning that they went in front of the Independent Review Board. But then only 4 of those cases were actually administered by the IRB. So as you'll see in the smaller print, there were, there's complaints that are submitted, of the 20, the formal complaints that we've received. Some of those folks didn't meet the requirements, meaning they're complaining about someone who's not tied to ICF anyway, in any way. So perhaps they're not an ICF member or a credential holder, different things like that. And then, of the complaints that go to the initial review, they review it to see if there's enough evidence to show that there's a potential that a breach has been a breach in the code has happened. And so there's lots of conversation that happens in that. Of course, ICF is a very large community of people, and 20 complaints for the 40,000 that call ICF home as a member. It's a pretty small number, but there are lots of complaints that happen out there that maybe just don't make it to the IRB. They could be handled in other ways, but this is just strictly based on the data that we've received for the Independent Review Board. So in addition to that, I would say for the ethical conduct review process, themes of concern, so the kinds of complaints that these 20 included, conflict of interest. 25% of the complaints that we received in 2019 were around conflict of interest. Not maintaining appropriate boundaries, that would be 15% of the complaints that we received. Breach of confidentiality, 10% of the complaints that we received broke confidentiality. And then general business disputes were 50% of the complaints we received. So that's for the ethical conduct review process. So with program complaints, which is also highlighted on the screen, you'll see that in 2019, we had 11 formal program complaints that were filed. And of those, they're handled in a little bit different of a process. All 11 of those training programs that were, and there may have been less than 11, but all of the 11 of those complaints were handled by our coach training team at ICF. And in 2019, 4 of our accredited coach training programs lost their accreditation status as a result of what was found in some of those complaints. Now, the themes of concern from the program complaints, we had 72% of the complaints around programs were around unclear expectations. 18% were around conflict of interest, and 10% were questionable sales tactics. Okay, so I'm going to move into ethics resources. ICF has a huge amount of ethics resources on its website, coachfederation.org/ I believe it's ICF ethics, or just ethics will get you there too. We've talked a little bit about some of these, so I'm going to really just spend my time focusing on the areas that we haven't touched on yet. So for starters, we would have this ethics assist line, and that's really, it's actually a direct contact to reach me. We have an email address, it's ethics@coachfederation.org, a telephone number, and it's open for people to be able to come forward and ask questions about the code of ethics, perhaps about a particular situation that you may find yourself in as a coach. If you are, wondering what the code may say about something that you're specifically going through, or a client's going through, you can check in with us on that. The main thing to keep in mind with this ethics assist line, we're not able to give legal advice or opinions, and it's really just for ICF ethics staff to be able to talk to you about it. And a lot of times it's used as a sounding board. So if you're having concerns about something, you can reach out to us. And also people who are interested in maybe filing a complaint. So, people, whether it's through the ECR process or the program complaint process, they'll come to us first just to ask questions about the complaint process and how that works, and to go from there. But it's open to you. And I always say, whenever I talk to different chapters around the world, don't let language be a barrier. You can email us. We're able to have it translated to see what it's saying. So don't think that it's only for English speaking coaches. It's for anyone. And we're always happy to help and answer your questions that you have around the code and those sorts of things. The next item on here is the Ethics CCE course, and we did spend some time talking about this already, but as I mentioned, it's a complimentary course offered by ICF. Right now, what you'll find on the website, if you go look at the ethics resources, is the previous version of the code, that ethics course. We left it on there so people could continue to get those credits for their credential renewal, because it does count as 3 CCEs in the area of ethics when you renew your ICF credential. But we left it on there so people could still get those credits even while we're trying to make the updates and rebuild the program itself. So we anticipate having an updated version of this course by the end of this calendar year. So at the very latest, we would have the new course up and ready on the website would be January of 2021. So we're really excited about it. There's a really great group of individuals from the code review team who are actively working on this, and they've got lots of really great ideas to build on it. And ethics, it's not always the most exciting topic for a lot of people. So they're really trying to find ways to make it fun and allow coaches to continue learning in that space. The next resource we have is the Ethics Community of Practice. And if you, as a general statement, as a member of ICF, you have access to a lot of different communities of practice. And if you haven't checked those out already, I strongly encourage you to do so. There's lots of really great topics. They happen on a quarterly basis, and they're either, by subject matter experts that are leading webinars, or could be facilitated panel conversations. But it's a lot of really great information. So I know with the Ethics Community of Practice, they meet on a quarterly basis. And it's just a really good way to meet other people in the ethics community who are interested in coaching ethics, but then also to just grow your knowledge around the topic as well. So sign up for those if you're interested. You can also go back and review any past communities of practice, well, not just ethics, but any of them. You're able to go back and watch them on your own time as well. So it's a helpful resource. And if you're not a member of ICF, you are able to pay to attend those, but it is a member benefit. The next resource on here is the water cooler conversation. These are free to all coaches, and they're a little more informal than what the community of practice is. It's more of an open forum conversation, and as I said, they happen monthly, so it's a little more if you have almost like with that ethics assist line, if you have a question that you want to talk to other fellow coaches about, you can come join that space and raise your question. They don't record the calls, just, you know, for privacy and things like that. So you're able to speak freely and talk. They talk about a lot of different things. You know, you may join one month and they're speaking about the use of artificial intelligence with coaching, and, you know, something as simple as having like an Alexa device, and should that be turned off when you're coaching, you know, and so big conversations about things like that. And, you know, in the next month, they could be diving into you know, a specific standard of the code, talking about confidentiality and, you know, concerns and things like that. So it's every month is different. I encourage you to check that out as well if you're interested, or if you have questions. It's a good resource to hop into. At this time, they have, I think there's two that are for sure happening on a monthly basis. There's one offered in English and there's one offered in German. So that's what's on there currently. We're always interested in expanding that. So keep that in mind as well. The next resource we have on here would be the chapter leader ethical guidelines. And these were something that were created specifically with our ICF chapter leaders in mind. So when we say chapter leader, we're referring to not only a chapter's board of directors, the chair of the board, but also committee leaders or task force leaders, anyone who's serving in some kind of a leadership capacity within a chapter. I mean, it's really just a way to assist those individuals in the performance of their duties. So providing resources, kind of like the Code of Ethics provides a path, a guide for a coach. It's similar, but it's more specific for chapter leaders. So something to keep in mind if you're in a leadership position with ICF, or if you're considering stepping into a leadership position with ICF. And I know I'm covering a lot of ground and probably speaking a little too fast, but I want to make sure we have time for questions too. Now, the next piece that I want to talk about is compliance. This is often an overlooked piece of what ICF does, but it's a very important thing too that ICF manages. ICF is very diligent in maintaining ICF's intellectual property, and that includes the management of trademark infringement. So, and really, because of that, it's really to ensure brand alignment and the continued value of affiliating with the ICF brand. You know, when you become an ICF member or an ICF credential holder, there's a lot of backing to that, and we want to continue making that, you know, as strong as possible for people. You know, and that way there's like the recognition in the market and clarity around what it means. So when someone is using our branding incorrectly, you know, we are swift to step in and talk about it. Like, we really try to use it as a learning process too. Sometimes, and every case is different. I mean, there are some blatant cases where people who have never had an affiliation with ICF are trying to use the ICF logo, or using the word ICF, or, you know, anything like that. And those, you know, if it's a little more blatant, our approach is a little different. But if it's someone who's maybe held ICF membership, didn't realize it lapsed, you know, we try to treat that as an educational opportunity to say, hey, you know, we see you, we can see what you're doing. And here, if you're interested in coming back to the ICF, here's what you need to do. And if not, we request that you remove this, because it's very important to us and all of our stakeholders around the world to maintain the integrity of the ICF brand. So really, I just wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about what we do when we receive compliance-related concerns at the ICF office. So typically, what the process is, we would receive something. And right now, with how small our ethics department is at ICF, it's a department of one, it's me. We're not as proactive as we'd like to be. So that means that we rely heavily on all of you, on all of our members, our credential holders, our chapters, our staff around the world to, when they see things, they come to us and let us know. So that way we're able to investigate and reach out to the party in question. And typically we'll receive, a call or an email or, something of that nature. And it typically includes, a URL to a website or perhaps an attachment that's a brochure, or something like that if it's a training program, or social media websites, LinkedIn, etc. And so we'll look at it, we'll see what they're claiming, and then we'll go to our database. We'll just pull up the person's record, and if they have one, we'll see when their credential expired or their membership lapsed or, those kinds of things. And so we'll kind of sort out the pieces on this end, and then we'll reach out to the party in question. So it really, and as I said, it's really a case-by-case basis. It really just depends on the nature of what they're doing or the severity of the situation and those kinds of things. But all of those get some kind of an outreach just so we can figure out and get everything back in alignment. Okay, I guess I don't have a slide for it, but I do have some typical trademark concerns just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So for an individual, there's top 3 examples of what we see. There could be a non-ICF member using an ICF logo on their marketing materials or their website or their social media platforms. So if you're not an ICF member, you can't use the ICF logo. And this is a good time to clarify that the ICF standalone logo is used to show membership with ICF. So if you are a member of ICF, you can use that logo to show that membership. The credential logo is really where you would have to hold that specific credential to be able to use that. But any ICF member could use the ICF logo. Another example would be, let's say an individual, it could be an ICF member, using the standalone ICF logo on their employer's website. And that conveys an overarching relationship with ICF, and that wouldn't be allowed. So even if you hold membership, but if you're putting it on an organization's website, it could be confusing in the marketplace to understand what that connection between that organization and ICF is. Another example, common example of what we see would be an individual, and it could be an ICF member, may not be, but they're using a program accreditation logo. So that would be ACTP, ACSTH, or CCE to show that they've completed that level of training, an ICF accredited training program. And individuals can't use those logos. Those are strictly for training programs. So that would be an incorrect use of a logo as well. So in terms of organizations, I have a couple examples of those as well. Typical things that we would see, the first one would be a non-approved program using an ICF accreditation logo on their materials. So much like a non-member using an ICF logo, it would be a non-approved training program using an ICF ACTP or ACSTH logo, which is clear, not allowed. If you don't hold that level of accreditation, your program shouldn't be using that logo. Another example would be, let's say it's a coaching school, and they may have multiple training programs underneath that one school. Maybe one or maybe even 2 of those hold ICF accreditation, but not the remainder of the programs. But if they're using it to show, if there's confusion about which program actually holds the accreditation, that is a common example of something we see. And then another example for an organization would be an organization using the logo on its website to convey an overarching relationship with ICF. So that standalone ICF logo, as I mentioned, it's meant for individual use only, and we don't allow organizations to use it. So that would be a way that you're using that logo incorrectly as well. But those are the common ones. I mean, there's, as I said, every case is different, every situation is different. We've dealt with things as blatant as organizations using, ICF in their company name, different things like that. We do have legal counsel that we have that supports us, especially in some of those larger cases like that. But a lot of what we see is really maybe people who don't realize that something that they have has expired, and that sort of thing. So we try to treat it as an educational opportunity as well. But we do find the brand to be very important, and we want to uphold that, the integrity of the brand. So this work is a very important piece of what we do. I think, Ala, that might be all that I have. So wanted to open it up to questions that maybe you're seeing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kristen. As of now, we have 4 questions posted on Q&A. And Dragana, I also see your raised hand. Yeah, we'll start with questions and then I will unmute you and you will be able to ask your question. So I think, I'm sorry, but I would like to start with the question which was posted latest because it's very well connected with what you explained in your latest slides. What do we do if we see that someone who is not ICF member and does not hold credential is calling himself ICF coach?
Absolutely. Great question. I would encourage you to reach out. On the screen. We have that ethics@coachfederation.org email address. You could reach out to me there and just send over, like, the main thing that I need when I'm looking at these cases that come in would be a URL and a very clear, like, tell me where you're finding it, what the claim is, because then I can do some digging too, just to see what it is. So just email us, or if you want to call, you can do that as well. But all of the contact information is on the screen. So just reach out, let us know, and then we can move forward from there.
I just wanted to add, as I'm partnering with Kristen for 7 years already, so just send an email to her. It would be great if you provide all the information just in your first initial letter, and Kristen will immediately approach this coach
Right.
with the question. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so another question, and I see all others which are in chat, so we'll try to do our best and answer to all of them. So this is a question regarding CKA, and I'm not sure, Kristen, but I will just read and you will answer it. I would like to suggest to ICF to ask coaches to redo CKA every 3 years.
That's great. Yeah, and that would be credentialing. I'm not sure what the requirements are around the CKA, but I'm happy to take that to our colleagues who work in that on that team. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
So
thank you, Christine.
retaking it every 3 years.
3 years.
Is that what?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So I think it's a question to you, Christine. Is it possible for ICF to include more questions to FAQ Code of Ethics, which I found very useful? So
Absolutely.
more questions.
And I'm really glad that came up, because that was a resource that just recently got updated on the website that I didn't include in this presentation. So thank you to whomever asked that. The FAQs on our ethics page, and were they specifically speaking about ethics?
Yeah, Code of Ethics, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Because we did recently update those to reflect the new version of the code. So I encourage you to check that out as well on the ethics page with all of the other resources. And yes, absolutely. If you have specific questions that you'd like to pose, use that same email address that you see on the screen, and I'd be happy to take those to our code review team and to help them craft answers to those so they can be added. Like the interpretive statements that you saw, the FAQ is also a living document, so we're able to add to that at any point.
Thank you, Christine. And again, that is a question regarding CKA. This is a question about translation of CKA into Serbian. And Alexandra Jankovic suggests to translate it for free. So she can say, I think it would be much easier for people who do not speak English to pass assessment.
Sure.
And, yeah, please start answering. If I will have something to add, I will happy to add after you answer, Christine.
Okay. Thanks, Ella. Yeah, I think that's great. And that would be something else that we would want to send to our colleague, Carrie, who oversees the credentialing and standards team at ICF. Feel free to send me an email address at that ethics@Coach Federation address you see on the screen. And I'd be more than happy to get that to the right place within ICF with that suggestion. Thank you for that.
I just wanted to add that currently CKA is under reviewing process. As we change Code of Ethics, as we change our core competencies, of course, we need to review and amend according to the latest versions, the CKA as well. So I would strongly recommend, and that's what we're doing with other chapters right now, we strongly recommend to wait until June, I guess, 2021, when the CKA, the new version of the CKA will be ready. And then, of course, we will be asking our chapters to help us at least to review the translated versions. Yeah, and thank you so much for this suggestion. Yeah, so let's stay in contact. Yeah, and let's partner in this question as well. So let me provide Dragana. I push the button. Yeah, I can unmute you right now. Oh, what is wrong? Unmute. Dragana, can you please try unmute yourself? No. Can you please try talk? Because I can't, I don't know, because we said we were ready that. Dragana, could I ask you to post the question on a chat or on a Q&A space, because unfortunately, maybe there are some settings on this webinar. Yeah, we needed to explore it more to use it next time. So Dragana, please feel free to post your question on a chat. And on a chat, there is a question from Alexandra. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Interluca asks, what is the most important difference between the new and the old ethics code of ethics?
That's a great question. I would say the essence of the code is very similar to the previous version of the code. The biggest change is probably that referral of the ICF professionals. So previous versions of the code didn't go so far as to explain as all of the ways that what an ICF professional is, and that. So the difference is whether you're acting in a role of a coach supervisor or a mentor coach, a coach, a trainer, any of those ways that you're showing up as an ICF professional, those are all ways that you need to be thinking about the code and how you're showing up in those settings. So that was a big difference. And an interesting thing that I didn't really go into in this presentation, when the code review team did their work over the 18 months that they were revising the code and that sort of thing, they did have some suggestions for an updated values of the code. And there was even an updated version of a definition of coaching that was presented to the global board. And at the time, the global board knew we were on the brink of becoming this much larger ICF system with all of these different family organizations. And they had the foresight to think that, let's have all of the stakeholders involved in that conversation. So actually later this year, there are representatives from each of those different ICF boards that are now in existence that are coming together to talk about the values of ICF and, should there be revisions to these, and the definition of coaching, should there be a revised definition. But there was really great work done by the code review team that is now coming back. At the time when the code was approved at the end of last year, that was a piece that they decided to table until later conversation, so later this year. But that would be a big piece that would be different too, just with some of these different values that they've offered and those sorts of things. But in what stands, I would say there was some shifting of standards and those things, a little more detail provided, but really that use of ICF professional was probably the biggest marker over the 2015 version of the code. Sorry, a little too much information probably, but but just so everyone's aware of that, like where that is.
Okay, we have one more question in chat. Yeah, that's thank you from Interluca. Thank you so much. Please post your questions, ask your questions. We have a great opportunity to talk to Kristen Kelly, ICF Assistant Director of Ethics, Policy and Compliance today. And Kristen, while I'll be waiting for the new questions, I would like to ask you a little bit more about community of practice. So
sure.
I think, yeah, that's a great initiative. We have 10 communities of practice in ICF Global, and I think that you are very well connected with ethics community of practice. But just tell a little bit more. Let's just promote this great opportunity for our members.
Absolutely. So, you know, every quarter it's something different. Like they'll put a different focus of what that quarter will be looking at. You know, especially around when the new code was released earlier this year, there were a lot of sessions that were focused on the code. So there was a panel discussion at the end of 2019 that involved people who worked on the code. From the code review team, and just, you know, so it's very, every quarter is something different, and it's just a good way to expand your knowledge, really. You know, other months or other quarters rather, it could be something more specific where they're talking about confidentiality, or, you know, something more targeted than the code. But really, it's either subject matter experts that the community of practice finds out in the community to come and speak about a certain topic, or they're hosting facilitated panel conversations, so much like the one for the code at the end of last year. Every quarter is different. So if you have any sort of interest in coaching ethics, then or wanting to just expand your knowledge in it, it's a good opportunity to do that, and just to get to know other people who are big thought leaders in the field as well.
So just a very practical question. Just Ala, a new ICF member and very interested in ethics in coaching, and have heard at the webinar with Kristen Kelly about community of practice. So what will be my steps? So how I could get there?
And you know what? I think I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah,
Let me just exit out of this, and then I'm going to open up my internet. Let's see here. Because I think it'd be really helpful just to walk you through. That's what I would recommend.
And that would be a great example if we walk through this community of practice, and our coaches, our members could join any other. As I mentioned, we have 10 of them.
Absolutely. So if you're wanting specifically, I'm going to go to the ethics page first, just so they can kind of get a feel for what I talked about, and then I can go to the others. So if you're on this,
go to the others. Just let's take
ethics
as an example.
Okay. So this is the homepage of the ICF website. So if you scroll all the way down now, and I will say too, we're in the middle of rebranding, in the midst of all of these shifts and changes that ICF is undergoing this year. So it will look different next year. But as it stands right now, if you scroll to the very bottom of the page, we have a lot of different items you can get to from the very bottom, and ethics is one of those. So if you click on ethics, it's going to take you to this page, and everything I talked about today is accessible from this page. So I'll just scroll through slowly so you can see it. But if you link to the code, you know, and it's something important to show you on the code page as well. We have the actual code itself, and please forgive me, I'm going to scroll fast just so you can see what's at the bottom. So the code itself, and then there's the PDF download, which is the English version, but then we do have translated versions available as well. So if you click on any of these, you'll see some information, and then you can download the PDF of that as well. So very accessible, and we're constantly adding new languages here as well. You can also access the interpretive statements that I mentioned from this page, as well as that previous ethics page. So that was just something I wanted to call out. Okay, we talked about complaints, so you can see information about the complaint process. There's an information packet, a sample form. The actual link to file an individual ethics complaint is accessible here. And then if you scroll down a bit, you're going to see these ethics resources. So this is everything that I covered. And the community of practice for ethics is one of these. So any of these, they all expand. So you can click on it. It gives you a brief overview of what that community of practice is. And then you just hit this Join Now button. And it's going to take you to this page where you're going to want to sign up. So it'll just ask you for some basic information, and then hit Submit, and then you'll be in. And then you can join the different sessions that are taking place. You can also go back and watch past communities of practice meetings that have happened on your own time as well. And same with the water cooler conversation. Similar thing, you can join the conversation, and this takes you to a Zoom page, because those happen on Zoom, where you can put in your information and then you can join. The English version is actually happening in this hour right now, so you'd be able to join live, but typically it would just say something about join, and you can add those events to your calendar because they have like what the other dates are. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you. It's extremely useful. So if you register for community of practice or water cooler coverage sessions, you will get access to the schedule, to the topics, to the speakers, especially for community of practice. And also you will get access to previous sessions. So I think it's really very, very useful. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Christine. Yeah.
Sure.
And it is free for ICF members, yeah?
Yes, that is right. So
so
the communities of practice free for members. There is a charge if you're not a member of ICF, and the water cooler conversations are free to any coach. You do not have to be an ICF member to participate in those.
These are all ICF member benefits, yeah, which we can use, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Laura Kunzberger, I think there was much more attention also on the diversity and discrimination aspects compared to previous code of ethics.
Yes, we did include, there were some definitions included, and let me just pull up the code for you all. And it kind of alludes to some of these values that were crafted by the code review team that haven't yet been approved by the ICF. It's part of that conversation happening with all of the different stakeholders from the different boards. But those definitions that you're talking about, yes, those are new. So if you'll look at specifically systemic equality, and there's a few other things in here. So there's the code itself. Like, this is a good example because this is a definition that's new to the code this year, but there's really not a lot of reference to it within the standards themselves, because there's more about it within this section. So if you saw the version that went to the board last year, this section right here was expanded a bit. There were some proposed values, like the ICF values that are in existence. There was some additional language added to that. And that's where something like this definition would come into play, because it was talked about specifically in those values. So as this value summit happens later this year with all of those different stakeholders that I mentioned, we'll be able to update the code with that piece of information as well, depending on where they land, you know, with that larger group of people. But yes, good call out for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you so much. Okay, the ICF members, their coaches, do you have any additional questions about ethics in ICF? Christine, would you like to add something? As you mentioned earlier, you recently updated the Q&A session in part in Code of Ethics page on the ICF Global. Maybe there is something you would like to share with our attendees today?
You know, I think that's the most recent thing that we've done in terms of ethics on with the updates to the website and that sort of thing. I think the main thing that I would keep in mind is that you have a lot of resources at your disposal, you know, right here on the website, a lot of different ways that you can connect in conversation. So whether it's a community of practice or a water cooler conversation, or the ethics assist line. So if you have a pressing question that you're looking to find support on, you have all of these right at your fingertips. And we urge you to take advantage of it and reach out to us with questions. You know, and with you making suggestions for the interpretive statements or the FAQs, keep in mind, I mean, we are all a part of the ICF community together. So if you have suggestions or comments, we welcome that as well. It's an ongoing process. And as I said, the Code of Ethics specifically is reviewed every 3 years. So any feedback we get, we're constantly reviewing it and keeping a record of that. So that way, when the next code review team is formed in 3 years, we're able to pull back on that and have a starting place for those conversations. So that's the main thing. Just keep the communication lines open. We're happy to be in support and be in conversation and answer any questions you have.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Communications today is the most important. Yeah, so yeah, that's the way how we could stay connected, address questions to each other. So there is one more question from Tatiana Dragovic. Do you plan to add specific guidelines for so-called in-house coaches? Tatiana, do you mean internal coaches? I do so.
Christine, can you say that? Can you read that one more time? Yeah. I'm sorry.
Do you plan to add specific guidelines for in-house coaches. So I
Okay.
guess that
Internal.
it's internal. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Coaches working in the organizations. Yeah.
So I would say that there are like the code of ethics and the ethical standards that are outlined within the code of ethics that pertains to all coaches. And there are some specific standards within the code itself that are specifically talking to internal coaches to keep in mind. So I would say, you know, we're at this time, we're not looking at a standalone piece specifically for internal coaches, but the code of ethics does specifically call out internal coaches and a few of the standards, but the entire code would pertain to them as well.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, so any additional questions? One? We still have 10 minutes to address questions to Christine. Okay. Christine, it looks like that your presentation was comprehensive. Yeah. Not comprehensive, that you covered all the topics. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, yeah, for your answers. I would like to congratulate us all on the first webinar organized by a group of 7 EMEA chapters, and I'm looking forward to meeting our attendees at the following webinar in October. So there are still 2 questions arrived. We still have time. Thank you. Looking forward to participating in your training. Yeah, thank you, Laura. We will try to do our best and to organize more webinars with Christine. And then would Christine be willing to give brief version of the presentation in academic setting where students are getting familiar with coaching profession?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, myself and then also the members of the independent review board are all of us are more than willing to support in that way. So maybe just send me an email directly and we can connect and see what would be the best fit for your particular request. It's ethics@coachfederation.org. I can put that in the chat as well.
Okay, so we can wait for additional questions which could arrive in a very last minute, or just let us know on a chat that we are ready to finish our webinar today. Okay, Kristen, thank you again. Again, thanks for everyone. Yeah, and see you again in October.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ella.
Thanks.